Bro, Duke, what the fuck are you doing in my video? I'm here to start out the summer for you, my boy. Tight shit. Hey, but for real though, it's me, it's your boy Julian Primo, and I don't understand why no one is talking about this man. We got Albert Einstein, Henrietta Lacks, Marie Curie, Soulja Boy, some of the most recognizable figures in history thanks to their contributions to humanity. But for some reason, no one is talking about Julian Brown, aka Nature Jab. In case you haven't seen his page before, Julian Brown is an inventor based in Atlanta, Georgia. He is the founder of his company Nature Jab. He uses this process called microwave pyrolysis to transform different types of plastics into usable oil. I've been keeping up with him for a while now, and I took a particular interest in him and his goals. He is essentially just a young man who's passionate about repurposing plastics into fuels. And he's taken that concept to astronomical levels of success. Now, this sounds amazing on paper, but his journey to get to this point was anything but smooth. July 26, 2022.
Hello, my name is Julian Brown.
This is Julian Brown, our protagonist and friendly neighborhood Martian apparently, and he'll be telling us a little bit of why he started his journey.
What motivates a teenager to build a reactor? Well, it all started back in 2021, and I was very upset after I read an article that said globally we throw away over 3.4 billion masks every single day, and in 2020 alone, 1.6 billion masks were thrown into the ocean.
So I understand that these numbers are a little bit outdated here, and masks have more or less been phased out by this point, but I wanted to illustrate his point a little bit more because this number is actually a lot crazier than it seems. After weighing a couple of our own masks and scaling it up to 1.6 billion, I found that we were throwing out approximately 35.2 million kilograms of masks yearly. Dude, that is 13,487 Rolls Royces, 141 of those cat mining dump trucks, 0.35% of the heaviest freight train on record, but it is still 0.000000002% of the weight of your mother.
For a while, I was so disappointed reading these statistics that I became pessimistic. However, Mom always taught me, if there's a problem, there's a solution. And I listened to that song by Michael Jackson, the one that goes, "Man in the Mirror," and I decided I'm making the change. Through observing nature and her complex systems, I learned there's no such thing as a material that cannot be recycled into nature's infinite closed loop. It all comes from and can be returned to Earth. It's just a matter of doing it properly.
So he doesn't go into much detail about it in this video, but he's really underselling himself here. According to his website here, he started his journey way back in grade 12 when he cut a tendon in his right hand. So just like any normal high schooler, he just starts researching pyrolysis reactors. Like, duh, bro. That's what you're supposed to do at that age, bro. Little Timmy over there, little Timmy, he started his nuclear reactor in grade 7, bro. Like, what are you doing? Paying taxes, working a 9 to 5. Like, oh my gosh, bro. Like, I wish I was that motivated at 18, man. What was I doing at 18?
In Greek, the word pyro means heat, and lysis means to break apart. Put 2 and 2 together, and you get breaking apart something with heat. Now listen, pyrolysis, it melts the plastic into a liquid, and then it evaporates it. I like to think of it like if you leave ice out on a hot summer day, what's going to happen? It's going to evaporate.
Now, the thing that I find so interesting about pyrolysis is that it involves no oxygen. Like Julian explains here, we're essentially heating up all molecules in an area at the same time with microwaves. Now, this is important because oxygen causes all sorts of chemical reactions that makes bad, icky, goofy stuff like sulfur dioxide. Involving oxygen also doesn't allow us to extract materials like the ones that he listed in the video untouched, usually because it either melts them or completely changes their chemical composition. So I think pyrolysis is a great way to work around this issue, but it also brings to question the safety of this process. This paper by Yifan Du and colleagues states that plastics release gases like methane, ethylene, and propane when pyrolyzed, which are very much flammable products. So I'm just not sure how you would safeguard against that as a non-expert in this field.
You see, with pyrolysis, when it's condensed, it becomes an oil. Talked about the gas and the liquids. Now we're missing a part of this triangle. And I ain't talking the Illuminati, I'm talking about the solid product. Now with the solid products, you get carbon black, which can be used for roads, pigments, tires, filters, and so on. And on top of that, it gets even better than that. You can recover any minerals from the plastic. This includes copper, aluminum, silver, palladium, and guess what? You can get gold from plastics. That's pretty cool if you ask me.
So he brings up the fact that you can actually extract gold from pyrolysis. Now, coming from a scientific background, I just had to investigate this for myself because that straight up sounds like a scam. The way that he phrases it, he makes it sound like one of those, for a small investment of $4,000, I will teach you how to make $4,000 by scamming people. Like, bro, you gotta be a special type of gullible to fall for those scams in this day and age, bro. But, unlike those financial gurus, he's actually right. You can extract gold from plastics, but it's not as straightforward as it seems. You can only extract gold if you're pyrolyzing PCBs, IC chips, or any gold-bearing plastics. So essentially, you need to already have gold to extract gold. Man, it's just like one of these financial guru influencers, bro. You can make something out of nothing. The same way that they made the money that they already have because they had daddy's money to rely on. You gotta have gold already in your plastics to extract that gold, bro. So fast forward into the video, he talks about the first model of his reactor, which was powered by propane gas. Turns out it was very heat inefficient. So he moves into his second and third models, which I think is the most interesting part of this video. The second model, a considerable upgrade from the first, uses volumetric heating. Big issue though, it's not vacuum sealed. So products like methane, ethylene, and propane, like I mentioned earlier, are reacting with oxygen while inside. So that's pretty bad. He pivots into what I call Model 2.5. It is vacuum sealed, it uses a cylindrical design, and it includes this electrical box that contains all the wires and transformers in one place.
Hold it!
Okay, now wait a minute. That implies that it wasn't all in one place beforehand. So he was walking around with exposed wiring and flammable gases in one area. So if you haven't noticed already, I have some issues with the way that Julian handles his projects here. I'll talk more about that later in the video, but as you can see, just from the first 2.5 models, Julian has already built 3 iterative machines that always improved on itself. Admittedly, his process brings up a lot of questions about scalability, efficiency, and most importantly, safety. But all in all, these are totally fixable issues that he can address if he just keeps it going. And that's exactly what he does. Fast forward 6 months, Julian has been going to town on his reactor. He's put damn near everything in there, man. Coffee, wood, used motor oil, tires, kick streamers, Twitter users, corporate bootlickers, all sorts of useless wastes. And he did a miracle. He turned them into something that's useful. So the next step, of course, is to expand out to Mark III. The main objective of this build seems to be big. Part 1 was straight to the point. He found a barrel which he tries to install this Archimedes screw type of mechanism into called an auger. Everything was initially smooth sailing. He starts work on it in part 1 and finishes up most of the work in part 2. But in part 3, he encounters one of the many setbacks he will face throughout his journey.
Thin material like packing or something, and it's gonna just sit up on that shaft and really form a good seal. So that's my idea, you know, it's kind of hard to see. But from this point forward, everything just goes downhill. The moment I go to actually put the actual auger blade in here and not just this little shaft I had, you see it doesn't line up at all. I was not really basing the measurements and dimension off this stuff based off the auger blade, and obviously that sits in this reactor differently. You know, I was just assuming everything would line up perfectly, but of course it didn't. So I had to do some advanced Street Fighter type welding techniques to get this thing on there. And after all of that, I went to go push the shaft through, and it didn't go through. I was just like, this can't be, you know, I was in disbelief.
An understandably frustrating experience. But for someone like Julian, this is a mere setback in his grand goals. In the next couple of videos, Julian really starts locking in. In part 1, he successfully aligns the auger shaft and finishes attaching the auger mechanism and legs and one of the waveguides to the barrel. Then in part 5, he just goes ballistic. He starts adding a bunch more microwaves, a window, and these pipes that I'm assuming is for extracting gases. Essentially, the whole contraption is starting to look like one of those machines in Gus's meth lab. Everything is really starting to come together for Julian, and things are looking promising. But soon enough, disaster strikes. A mere 10 days after the final part, Julian goes through what I'm assuming was a routine run to see how everything was running. And lo and behold, he finds leaks all over the place. But it wasn't as if those leaks were hopeless though, he just needed some time and materials to properly seal those leaks. Then he puts his camera down. And the worst possible scenario came to be.
Shortly after I turned the camera off, I went to go give the agitator a spin. Every time it's agitated, the pressure builds up immensely. And it happens so quickly, the pressure builds up so quick that this thing, it exploded again.
The entire back of the reactor blew out and got sent flying a couple meters out the tent. Julian also mentions this wasn't even the first time the reactor blew out. So that brings me back to my point. Julian is putting himself in a lot of danger and he has inadequate protocols in place, if at all. People in his comments like to joke that the government or these big oil companies are after him, you know, like how Boeing goes after its whistleblowers. But I argue that the greatest danger to Julian is honestly his experience. I think there's nothing wrong with being inexperienced, but I also think it's just as important to recognize that you are inexperienced and put safety protocols in place that will allow you to make these mistakes. Like I mentioned before, his process involves a lot of flammable gases and high pressure environments. And the way that his rig was set up before, it presented a lot of potential dangers which could seriously hurt Julian if he's not careful. On October 15, 2022, about 3 months after finishing Mark III, Julian posted this video where the tent was set ablaze.
If you had to put a price tag on your life, how much would you say you're worth? If your answer isn't at the minimum $1 trillion, then you have work to do. Behind me, 3 years of my hard work has just been burnt to a crisp overnight. Despite that, anybody asks me this question, I'll tell you the same. I am worth trillions at bare minimum. You can't control what happens outside of you, but you can control how you internalize and how you see anything. And I choose to see everything as a challenge, and I will never quit. So I ask you again, how much are you worth?
Julian himself admits he doesn't know what the exact cause of the fire was.
So what exactly happened? I don't know.
It could have been an electrical fire, but assuming the breaker was working properly, that would be unlikely. He mentions there was excess plastics right beside the electronics box, which could have acted as kindling of sorts for the sun's rays, but honestly, only God knows, bro. We'll really never know what happened on that day. All that just to say that no matter how benevolent and inspiring Julian's actions are, it doesn't change the fact that he's inexperienced. And it was actually the same inexperience that could have cost him his life. But thankfully, that's not the end of Julian's story yet. In this model, Julian is inching closer and closer to the final design that we see in his videos now. Off rip, you'll notice he's starting to acquire some shiny looking components, and he's also using dedicated gas tanks now to handle high pressures. My favorite part of this machine is the makeshift contraption that he uses to spin the auger blades. Like, yes, it provides more leverage, but also he mainly uses it to spin the auger blades from like 5 meters away. You can't make this shit up, bro. Like, yes, from a professional standpoint, this looks like a nightmare of a place to be in, but also it's kind of endearing because the dude clearly doesn't know how to install proper safety precautions, but he recognizes the importance of it. So as a workaround, he uses a vibranium shield to protect himself from his experiments. Like, it's honestly inspiring to watch. It's just scary to look at, to be honest with you. I do want to give him his props though. This time around, he's using a face shield and gloves and the aforementioned vibranium shield like I mentioned. So that's really nice to see. Dude looks like he's ready to antagonize the nearest black person he sees. He looks like he's in a war zone. And he is. With this ticking time bomb, hell no, man.
We're gonna do an agitation test now. If we can pass the agitation test without busting somewhere, that's really, really good.
With experimental success, Julian put the pedal to the metal once again. We already know he can turn plastics into fuel, but if you didn't know already, there are hundreds of different types of plastics distinguished by their molecular structures. This is important because recycling different types of plastics requires different approaches. Judging by Julian's YouTube page, he's already capable of recycling single-use coffee cups, tires, styrofoam, lab waste, e-wastes. My Little Pony?
Silly black people. They always think they can accomplish everything by just sitting around.
It doesn't just stop at plastics either. Wood chips, used motor oil, grass, coal. This dude could probably recycle Viltrumite DNA if he wanted to. But on May 25, 2024, 20 months after his last accident, Julian experienced probably his deadliest accident ever.
So I have to move quick with this so we don't lose any gasoline. We will lose some, but we don't need to lose that much.
You remember when I said he was working with a lot of flammable gases and high pressure environments? Well, his distiller, the thing that he uses to create diesel, gasoline, jet fuel, the thing that's sitting on top of an open flame, the worst possible thing you could blow up, that blew up because Julian unfortunately forgot to turn on the pump that prevents the distillation chamber's pressure from getting too high.
I, however, ran this distiller without putting the vacuum pump on. Those vapors started to build in the distillation chamber. I went to open up the collection port to collect my gasoline out, and that's when the pressure of all those vapors jetted out like you see here.
The worst part of it all was that Julian still wasn't wearing any safety gear. I understand he probably got comfortable. After all, it's been more than a year since his last accident by this point. But regardless, there's a reason why safety precautions exist. Even if you've been safe for a year, 2 years, 5 years, a decade, it doesn't matter. They should always be in place. Mind you, this was the same attitude that Louis Sloan had with the fucking Demon Corps. Yeah, the dude handling nuclear bombs with a screwdriver. For the record, it was actually his assistant Harry Daglian who caused the Corps to go critical. But regardless, all the scientists there deserved more than just raw dogging the Demon Corps. Despite all I've said, I don't dislike Julian as a person. I've watched hundreds of his videos by this point, and the dude's genuinely funny as fuck at the most unexpected times.
This is 12 different circuits, all from the same power supply. So I'd like to see you try to make that not an orgy. That's like asking Blue's Clues to be a blood instead of a Crip, okay? It's not happening.
What the f is that analogy, bro?
This right here is a manometer. This is gonna call Diddy to my location in approximately 2.5 minutes to touch all the men.
Oh, yeah, Julian, holy shit, man. Giving me tidbits of gold here and there. Despite the crazy accident he just experienced, Julian is more than eager to keep working on his project, this time with proper PPE, by the way. Can I get a clap for that, chat? Can I get a clap? No, clap with your hands, clap with your hands. And also, a big announcement for Julian. He just got approved for a $100,000 grant by the 776 Foundation. For those who don't know, the 776 Foundation was founded by Alexis Ohanian, a Reddit co-founder, back in 2022. And Julian was actually one of the lucky recipients of this grant. So big shout out to Julian for making big moves. I'm proud of you, brother. I've been following his journey for a while now, and I can't wait to see how much farther he takes this in the coming years. But anyways, that's been it for me. Thank you very much for your time. It's Donland Primo. I'll see you guys next Saturday.